Hello and welcome back to Rehydrate. This season, we discussed Andy Weir's Project Hail Mary. We have all read the book, and this is a special episode where we're going to be talking to a couple of special friends about this book. My name is Dan. I have read the entire series. Thalia is also joining me from the show, and we also have Mike and Guy joining us. Guy is also a return guest from a previous episode, but let's introduce our guests here. Mike, why don't you tell us a little about yourself?
Yeah, hi. Yeah, I loved Andy Weir's books, and especially Hail Mary. Like, I read The Martian and watched the movie, and I'm really looking forward to the movie coming up for Hail Mary. I've been reading sci-fi since I was probably 10 years old. I loved the old days, the Asimov, Heinlein, Frank Herbert series of books, and really fell in love with sci-fi. And now, Brandon Sanderson, Orson Scott Card, and Andy Weir. Like, they're such great writers. Unfortunately, Andy Weir doesn't write fast enough, unlike Brandon Sanderson. So I read a lot more of Brandon Sanderson's books. Yeah, that's me. I've been reading sci-fi for probably 40 years.
Awesome. Well, great to have you.
Yeah,
Uh,
thank
and
you.
then and then our returning guest, Guy. Guy, maybe reintroduce yourself a little bit and your history with sci-fi.
Yeah, not I can't say I've read as much sci-fi as you all seem to have, but I'm a huge sci-fi film fan. I work in film. I'm an art director in film. I've done a lot of sci-fi films from that end. Big fan of The Martian. Saw the book. I mean, saw the movie first, and then read the book afterwards, and was blown away. I've seen the movie several times since then, and was excited when I saw this out, and quickly devoured it. And I'm quite looking forward to the movie. I'm really curious as to how they're going to play some of the elements, especially towards the end.
Great. Well, good to have you both. For listeners, just a warning ahead of time that this episode will contain full spoilers for Project Hail Mary, probably The Martian too, as we're going to talk about it. So if you have not read the books or watched the Martian movie or read the Martian book, just be aware that these things are coming. Yeah. So I guess let's just jump right into the discussion. And Mike, have you seen or watched The Martian?
Yeah, I watched the movie like Guy, and I also and then I listened to the audiobook shortly after that. And yeah, I find these books are very similar. Like, they have very similar story arcs to each other, and probably author what works for him.
Okay, cool. Yeah, so maybe let's just start with like, I think Guy, like when you were on last time, I said I hadn't seen The Martian, and ever since I finished Hail Mary, I went and rewatched The Martian, so I've also seen it. Yeah, so I think like maybe
Fantastic.
yeah, let's just start with like which one did you like better, Project Hail Mary or The Martian? And we'll start with Talia because I haven't given Talia a chance to talk yet. but, but thanks for joining us, Talia, as well.
Thank
So I
you.
guess like which did you prefer? Did you prefer The Martian or Project Hail Mary?
Thank you both for understanding that I'm dying to speak and also for the preemptive spoilers for The Martian because I anticipate that we probably won't be able to hold back because finally we've actually all like are all familiar with the material, so might as well discuss it in full. I noticed that The Martian, because I was looking at the audiobooks today, is a good deal shorter than Project Hail Mary, and I think that that does play itself out. Like The Martian feels a little bit more like there's one like core plot point, and I do feel like Hail Mary has a little bit more space to navigate around in. So I think it's down to preference. I do think that Hail Mary is a little bit more like sticky, almost like it's a little bit more unique. I think people go back and like reread it, rewatch it. But then again, you've just identified a bunch of people here have watched The Martian several times, so it could be up to disagree.
Did you say that you prefer Hail Mary to The Martian?
I think I will prefer the movie of Hail Mary to The Martian. And I think I preferred the book of The Martian to Hail Mary just because I found it just like a little bit more lean.
I agree. Yeah, I mean, I found The Martian. I think, as Talia said, it seemed a little more focused. There was like one goal, and it was the survival story, which I always love survival stories. And it just builds to that one point. Little couple of red herrings, right? As they're trying to get together, but even that was dramatically brilliant. And in the movie, it's just so well done. I thought Project Hail Mary was a little on the long side. And as I was listening to the audiobook, I kept expecting it to be kind of over, but no, there's still like 25 minutes left. There's still, I wasn't quite sure about the ending. I thought it was good, but I didn't think it was as good an ending as The Martian. And I'm not sure how the film is going to play that out. I've got some ideas as to what they might do with the film, which would be some radical departure, I think, from the narrative.
Well, Mike said that Andy Weir doesn't write fast enough, so if you can write faster, by all means.
I just feel like I felt like the end sort of, the twist at the end I found good for the context of the story, but I don't know if it's going to play out cinematically in the same way. It seemed a little happy at the end. Perhaps one too many scientific complications. I like the idea of the hiding in the material. Thought that was pretty cool, but
oh yeah,
that was the only real payoff for the extra bit at the ending. I don't know how they're going to play him on the other planet on Iridium because it's dark.
Yeah, especially because it's all dark. Yeah, you won't be able to see anything.
It's dark, and isn't the gravity 17 times or something like that?
Yeah, I think it was. Yeah.
At least 7. I mean, it was any kind of gravity is going to crush another human. So.
Yeah,
that was one of the host's favorite parts of the last section of the book as well. Was we actually all liked the sort of creeping suspense and then the reveal of why does it feel like the science has been breached? Why does it feel like everything's contaminated? And it gave a bit of a payoff to all the detail that went into explaining Xenonite in the last 3/4 of the book is okay, there was a point to it. It's such a different material. Other things will notice it's a different material rather than just look, guys, science fiction. So that was really satisfying. But it's unclear why they couldn't put him in an orbital spaceship and keep him at 1G, or why, I don't know. I think Priya had the biggest problem with him going back to be a school teacher. She felt
that was me. I thought that was lame.
You? I forgot you were so salty.
I liked the entire ending chapter except for the very last part. He's a school teacher. It's it's too on the nose.
Yeah. It's too on the nose. I found the same. Yeah.
Yeah. How about you, Mike? Which one did you prefer?
I feel like Project Hail Mary more than The Martian. I love The Martian, but I thought Project Hail Mary was like Thalia said, a longer book. It felt more complete. I think that Andy Weir started out writing much shorter stories, and he's been getting longer and longer to the writing. And I like the long multi-book series of books. I just don't want them to end, and that's how I felt about this book. I just love the relationship between Rocky and Ryland, and I didn't want it to end, and I thought it was the right length. I found the ending was almost like an epilogue, where it's oh, okay, they kind of did the thing, and then it's okay, and this is here we are 20 years later, and this is kind of how everything resolved at the end, a feel good, happy epilogue of the story, which it didn't really fit that well. I found it just kind of departed from the rest of the story, but it was a Hollywood ending. But I mean, I love the book, and I'm looking forward to seeing the movie and see how they pull it off. I am curious to see how Emma Stone will be as Rocky, and that's interesting.
I didn't know that part. Really?
Oh, spoiler!
Is that really true?
That is really true.
What? I hadn't heard that.
Shows how much we know.
Is it only because of her last name?
Maybe that makes sense. Actually.
Nice.
Yeah, for myself, I think I also prefer Hail Mary over The Martian. I only watched the movie. I didn't read the book. And I think it's more of a general just preference of space stories. I liked all the stuff about being in space and all the stuff about all those technical explanations of just spacefaring in general over just the complications of Matt Damon being on Mars. I think I even like the space stuff, even over the relationship stuff with Ryland and Rocky. Not that wasn't also good, but I think I even said as much in the second episode we had. I wanted them just to get on with, it was cool how they built their relationship between them and how they're figuring out the communication, but it kind of took a little too long for them to get to it. Once I got past the point where they could communicate, I thought it was a lot better.
Something that I wanted to, I guess, sort of give a shout out to is filmmakers and authors who understand how little you need to like create stakes or to create buy-in. And that's something where I think The Martian has a bit of an edge. It's just like it drops us right in and it's like, you're in a hab, it's tipping over. And you're like, okay, I'm bought in. Whereas I feel like Hail Mary spends a lot of time being like, I can't do this. I'm just a school teacher. What does a school teacher have to do with saving the world? I'm not an astronaut. And like The Martian still has a bit of it because we talk a lot about being a botanist rather than like a physicist. And I'm like, most people, like you hold those at arm's length. We don't know the difference between a physicist, a biologist, a botanist. Good enough, pretty sciencey. And just that little bit that's required to create the stakes, I feel like we could just cut a lot of that out of Hail Mary and then not go through the like, and I figured out how to communicate with him because I used computer science to convert the harmonies in which he was singing into an Euler note. I'm like, that's fine. You did it. Like, I get it. let's chat. So I think you were frustrated with like sort of like explaining what an audience can plausibly sort of like already get on board with.
So I love the explanations. I just love this, all the sciencey stuff, and how he went through the detail of explaining stuff. I'm a science nerd. I have a science degree, and I just like The Martian and Project Hail Mary. I thought he did a fantastic job of explaining the science so it was understandable in terms of and believable as well in terms of how he did stuff. So I thought he did a really good job of that. But I love that kind of stuff.
Yeah, I don't think it goes over the top.
If you notice in the Martian, the book has so much more elaborate explanation of all the science, which is great, which made the book really enjoyable. But in the movie they truncate it, and there's that entire like what seems like almost a quarter of the book, or at least another huge journey, is completely cut out of the movie because it would be too long otherwise, and it wasn't necessary.
I think it's like a montage. They like explain it very quickly and just sort of
Yeah. And I feel like there's going to be a lot cut out of the book of Hail Mary because it's much longer than the Martian. And I might be making an unpopular opinion here, but I've got a sneaking suspicion that Ryan will return to Earth in the movie.
Oh, you think so?
Wow.
Well,
Yeah.
it's a lot to do with the whole turnaround and then knocking on the ship, and all of that is like, it's a really long, it would be a large section of the movie, and I don't think there's time for everything that's in the book already. So, and I can see, I mean, this is just me, I don't know who's directing the film. I think we figured out last time who was directing, but I can't remember.
It was the Into the Spider-Verse guys.
Right. I would have a suspicion that some producer is going to be like, we don't need that. Let's cut it off at this point and have him either be on his way to Earth or something, but drop that whole section at the end. I really do feel like that's going to be the case. I might be totally wrong, and if I am, I'll eat that. But I just don't think they're going to have time for it.
Or maybe it just ends with like him making the decision to go see Rocky, and then they cut it out. Like, because I think like if he changes entire motivation, like about like where he's gonna end, like his decision about what he's gonna do, is he going to save Rocky, or is he gonna go back to Earth? Maybe they could just do it where like he decides to go see Rocky, but they don't do all the other stuff that happened, including the ending chapter. I can see that.
Yeah, I mean, it's a sadder ending if he walks away from Rocky. And they they don't reunite. It tugs on the heartstrings much longer. And in fact, when I was reading it, that's exactly what I thought was going to happen, and I was satisfied. And then it was like, oh wait, there's a whole what? We're going okay, which I thought was curious, But
yeah,
I think if they could find a way for him to still save Arid, then people will be satisfied. But if he's like turning his back on Rocky, that feels a little out of character. But there's definitely lots of like unrequited friendship or lover stories that like we've enjoyed on the shows we've read, just in science fiction, where it's like, what do you mean they never met again? Like they were right there, but
right.
they were on a different time stream, or like whoops, just missed you. And that I think has some poetry. But I think one of the reasons that some of the motivations we felt in the book could change under the hands of a director, because we as hosts, we never even like listed the names of other characters, or we tried, but it was such a half-hearted attempt because he goes into a lot of detail about like the kids in his classroom and tells us verbally how much he cares about them, but it never really lands, right? Like, what's the name of his favorite student? Who knows? Who cares? He shows us that what he cares about is the relationship with Rocky, and that's what really like pulls at the heartstrings. And so it's completely understandable that he wouldn't go back to a place that we have no attachment to. But if we show that attachment, I feel like that could also change how the ending plays out.
But if they dropped if they dropped the idea that what are they called again? I'm sorry, the microbes. What are they called again?
Astrophage.
The astrophage. If they left out the part about them evolving into hiding within the material, then you would just have this moment of them having succeeded, heading back to their homes and parting, and then and that would be it. I mean, that's just I suspect that that's going to be the case. And
that would be a good enough ending for a Hollywood movie.
How are we going to get a sequel?
Ooh, that would be interesting, hey? What would you do in the sequel?
Party with the Iridians, I guess.
I mean, Andy Weir did say that he was working on, like, he had like another, like a secondary, I don't know, another book, but he said he had ideas like that further the story. So I did hear that.
Interesting.
Yeah.
I would mention something that Mike brought up, which is that Andy Weir, he notices moving from like shorter stories to longer form. And that is sort of something we've seen since the history of science fiction, right? It's like someone won't buy your book, but you can get published in like a science magazine. That's how you get like this pulp fiction-y like short stories. And then we come to them later as completed works like Asimov, but actually they were like, oh, people are interested. Maybe I'll add a little bit more. Maybe I'll add more. And then it sort of snowballs. So if that happens and he goes in a different direction, I feel like that's also fine.
He'd be egging for a series at that point instead of a film.
Yeah. So Mike, you'd said that you'd read a lot of science fiction. Like, where would you put Andy Weir in relation to some of your other favorite series or other authors? Sorry.
Yeah, like I think he's not quite the hard science fiction writer like the old Larry Niven, Paul Anderson, Heinlein, Asimov. But he's up there. Like if I give Asimov a 9 out of 10 for hard science fiction, I would put him like around a 7 or so. Like just like he does get a lot into the weeds of the physics and the explanation, the scientific explanations and the math and everything. And I like that kind of stuff. But then you have like Brandon Sanderson, who he doesn't do like he's more into stories and less into the hard science, which I also appreciate. And magic systems and things like that. But in terms of like favorite writers, it's hard for me to pick him as a favorite writer because he has written so few books. And I think he wrote one about Sherlock Holmes that I haven't read yet, but it was also a short story. Whereas Brandon Sanderson, you can't even read as fast as he can write, so he's got way more books out there than you could catch up on, and some of them are like 1,000 pages. But I think they're a lot lighter, and Andy Weir's, they take a bit more commitment maybe to get into. I like the story of Project Hail Mary and The Martian. I think those are his best works. And I just got lost in it. I wish there was more of his books, and I started looking for more. It's like, oh, there aren't that many books out there yet.
If you like a commitment, why don't you sink more than 1,000 pages into the host's favorite science fiction show, The Three-Body Problem?
Yeah.
That's a good series.
Good. We're only allowed to use like hyper superlatives for Three-Body series in this show.
I was just saying, like Orson Scott Card, also one of my favorites. Just and he gets a little bit more into the details and the science, and like Ender's Game was it blew me away when I read it the first time. And then there's a lot of books around that.
And so, Guy, you said you hadn't read a lot of science fiction, right? Like, but you've obviously worked on a lot of movies and seen a lot of science fiction stuff. So, where would you put Andy Weir stuff in relation to your experience with sci-fi?
I think it's. Honestly, I think it's brilliant. I love the hard science in it. I love the sort of the reality-based. He's not coming from, extremely. Certainly Project Mary is more imaginative than the Martian, but I do love how he bases all his stuff in real hard science. I prefer that in sort of fantasy science fiction. So I mean, I would mark him as like one of my favorite sci-fi. His books leading to films, absolutely.
One thing I really appreciated when we first invited you on the pod, Guy, is the way that you'd experienced Hail Mary, right? Because I think it does matter to people who've listened to the audiobook or people who read it, because
Yeah.
it's such a theatric, I guess, performance. It feels really all encompassing. And not only that, but you were like a lone individual traveling for like, days on
Driving.
end across the
Yeah.
country, driving alone across the country. And so I feel like what a perfect way to experience one of Andy Weir's stories, who usually writes about like solitary male protagonists and their journeys that,
Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely. I mean, I was excited. I'd mentioned that I listened to another survival story of 419 days driving the other direction once, and another one that's just a lone guy in a boat across the Pacific, and this was exactly the same kind of thing. And when I was when listening to The Martian, was working on a show and I was doing a lot of driving, and it was perfect for that. It was great. And COVID hit before I finished the book, so I went on a very long, like 9-hour drive just to finish the book in my car. And yeah, I mean, it's my favorite thing to do, and it was the perfect book for crossing the country this time. And it just so happened that I landed here. It's really quite funny. I love it.
Yeah, it just worked out.
Yeah, and I just learned that the designer that I worked for last year is over in Europe working on Three Body Problem right now.
Oh, really? Interesting.
No way.
Yeah. He had kind of kept it a secret, and because I told him, I know he had gotten an offer before, and I was like, if you get it, I want in. And when he was like, sure, I'm traveling to Europe, I'm over here in Budapest, just hanging out. And I was like, wait a second, you're not hanging out. Are you working on Three Body Problem? And he's like, yeah, I am. So I was like thinking, wow, amazing, so cool.
So another thing we talked about on that Thalia and Priya talked about on like previous episodes was kind of the difference in our like preference between like dystopian and like more optimistic science fiction. So like Andy Weir is definitely in like the optimistic side of things, right? So like I think Martian even more so after watching it is like more optimistic even than Project Hail Mary, with all the world coming together and saving them and stuff. But Hail Mary has a happy ending. Where we've also read a lot of dystopian science fiction, and so let's go back to Mike and say, like, I guess, do you have a preference for dystopian versus optimistic? Do you like both? Like, what's sort of like your preference there?
Well, I grew up on Star Trek, and Star Trek is so optimistic, the classic Star Trek, and like it just presents a very positive view of what the future could look like if people cooperated. And so I kind of grew up with that. So yeah, for me, the optimistic look, the positive outcome, people working together to solve problems. That's kind of where I said I like the dystopian stories, the gothic sci-fi kind of things, but I do prefer the more positive, cooperative, working together kind of looking forward to a positive future. I think the world has enough problems in its future right now that I rather look towards positive futures.
Yeah, I was saying like last episode we were talking about it. It's like it seems like almost naively optimistic given the state of the world right now. It's like I don't think that the world would actually come together in the way that it did for The Martian, but yeah, you kind of hope so. I also like big Star Trek fan growing up, and I do like the kind of I like the idea of like the sort of utopian future society where the world works together to we actually not even the world work together. The world already worked together. We're already past the point where we've already have that society where we've gone past money. We've gone we have Starfleet. So yeah, I do like the dystopian stuff also. But I think I'm pretty much in alignment with you that the optimistic stuff is probably just a better read overall. You don't want to be super depressed reading it. And maybe that's why I look for optimism and stuff where people maybe don't see optimism for, if you listen to our last show. How about you, Guy? Which do you prefer?
I'm really of two minds. I agree. Like I'd like the optimistic sort of tack on science fiction when it's possible. Um, I prefer to work on dystopian stuff because it's much cooler to build and decorate and art direct. It's just dirtier and uglier, and it's more texture, and it's easier to dig your teeth into a grimy, failing world than creating optimism all around. But when I'm watching or reading, I prefer the optimistic point of view, 100%.
How about you, Talia? I think we talked about it last time, but have your thoughts evolved at all, or thought you've given more thought to like what you prefer?
I'm wondering if the hosts have all seen the Star Trek Next Generation episode Booby Trap, which is where I think it's extremely relevant to everything that's happening today. I don't know if anyone remembers it by the title, but
I don't remember by the title. I mean, I've definitely watched the entire show like multiple times, so I'm sure I've seen it. For the audience, you can give a quick synopsis.
Briefly, internet-assisted synopsis. But Picard finds himself trapped. The ship is down, and the only blueprints that can save it are from an engineer who's, been sort of reanimated, and it's almost like an artificial intelligence that they spin up based on her original designs, Dr. Leah Brahm's designs. And unfortunately, in the midst of solving this crisis, Geordi falls in love with the artificial intelligence, and we get this sort of like ethical conundrum of who's a person, who gets to exist, and what do the things that we create in the shape of humans owe to us. And I think things that pose those sort of like ethical dilemmas are definitely something more to sink your teeth into. And Star Trek is very optimistic, and it takes a lot of courage to design something that doesn't just devolve into dystopian. Because if you're creating art, whether it's music or writing, it's definitely easy to just sort of like have energy sink into like everything being terrible. But being able to pose interesting questions along the way is, I mean, I thought the ending of Three Body was devastatingly sad, but also sort of hopeful. And I know that people read that differently, similarly to like how people watch Inception, I guess. I don't like guaranteed endings, I guess. Guaranteed happy or guaranteed miserable.
Cool.
I took a lot of philosophy in college, so we're touched ahead.
Yeah.
I guess, what do you guys want to talk about? Like, what is drives you to be interested in this stuff? Like, what story points are that you want to talk about, or anything really? It's the open discussion for whatever is. We started this podcast because we wanted us the forum to talk about Three Body Problem, but in more broader context, to talk about stuff that we liked, and maybe we don't have people in our like direct friend group that likes the same thing. So give you guys open forum to talk about Project Hail Mary or any other stuff that you want to talk about.
Well, for me, the two things that drive me into science fiction, I think, are adventure and cool gadgets. And I mean, James Bond also fits that, but I just like tech and cool gadgets and new technology and cool ideas about technology. And Star Trek always had this kind of pseudoscience weird stuff going on where they would use fancy words to describe stuff, and I kind of loved it. Like, they would make these probable explanations for how things work using scientific words that probably don't actually mean what they say that they mean, but they did it well. Andy Weir is more hard sciencey based, where he actually does base a lot of stuff on science, and like he comes up with some really clever solutions for things, like how he created water on Mars by burning, what was it, hydrazine or whatever it was, and the byproduct of that is water. And I thought, some really clever solutions to the problems, or how he started growing potatoes using the waste of the composting toilets. And I thought it was just clever, and I love that kind of stuff. But the adventure, the survival thing, the adventure of exploring, any of those kind of stories drive me into science fiction.
Yeah, I really appreciated the ending of The Martian when he's speaking to the class, and he's like, when he's like What do you just start doing it. You solve one problem and then you solve the next problem. And he made it seem so elegant and simple, something that's so hard and complex and takes so much thought and, education and inspiration. But he distilled it down to this really simple way of just expressing it. And I loved that so much. As a sort of a closet science nerd, I get off on the passing that message across to a larger audience. When it's not something that is prevalent in today's world, people, thinking about solving problems, they're just like living for the next, TikTok video.
Next thrill. Yeah, that's a really, I think, complementary and like useful, actionable side to something I think I was circling as something I enjoyed is like, can you ask interesting, thought-provoking questions along the way? Can you like find purpose? Can you find your values? And what you bring up is like, can you solve problems? Can you solve the next one? And especially if it's broken down and there's a bit of like heroism in it, you can like see that heroism within yourself. And I really admire when any storytelling can do that.
And that's why when I was talking about how Hail Mary and The Martian were kind of the same story arc. It was about, okay, there's a problem and we're going to solve it with science, and there's another problem, we're going to solve it with science. It was like just a series of problems that he had, clever scientific ways of solving, and that's kind of why I saw them as very similar stories.
Yeah, you brought up the hydrazine, which props to you, incredible memory. And
right, I was like, wow, okay, cool.
Yeah. I'm like, all right, Mike, we believe you. You're the science. Also, if you're the science one on the pod, where are the cool gadgets? I feel like it's 2025. We could have way cooler gadgets by now, but that's a side quibble. I really was drawn to the same thing in the last episode, where like we learned that one of his captains or someone else on the crew like has this Hispanic name, and I think has even mentioned that it's Catholic, but it still doesn't feel like too much of a Deus Ex Machina. And he's like, in the personal items, he's allowed to bring something that we're not usually allowed to bring. He's allowed to bring a cross. It's a wooden cross. Like, finally, there is something on this ship that is flammable. It's not like, and then I found the magical flame stick that NASA included. And like, no, it's got to be like something plausible, but you had to think to get there. And that's what's like rewarding about games and interesting stories and I don't know, OG mystery novels. That I think that's probably a generation behind us. But, these things come in circles. They recur.
So was there a favorite? I mean, we talked about The Martian a lot, about the, technology that was invented, but was there a piece of technology that you found particularly interesting for Project Hail Mary?
I think the selective breeding of the whatever called
Thalia.
Like how do we get this stuff so it can actually live in a nitrogen-rich environment? Oh, that's kind of a cool idea. Let's just selectively breed it, and because it grows fast, it can do it in a short amount of time. Like that was, it wasn't a gadget, but it was a very, very scientific approach to solving a problem.
Yeah, and then to even bring in the radical, evolution that they didn't see coming. It's also a beautiful way because it's all so positive in that respect, and they succeed, but they didn't quite see this coming, which I thought was also brilliant.
The house always wins, can't really bend nature to your wills. You can solve incredible problems in science, but like, whoops.
What Pandora's box have you opened up while doing it?
And that's something that we see in or at least I see in good science fiction. It's like we solve one problem and then we open Pandora's box. We create cryogenic freezing and oh no, now society's different because some people can dodge death. Whoops.
True.
Yeah. So, Guy, did you have anything that you want to talk about? Like any burning plot points that you wanted to bring up? Thing that really that stuck in your memory from this book or anything?
Well, I was when we were talking about the cross and the Martian and bringing that slight element of religion into it, my brain just went right to Contact and the dichotomy between the science and religion in that, which was so well done.
So well done.
Yeah,
it was so brilliant.
Yeah, I was saying last episode that when the base or the thing exploded, right? And they didn't where the two scientists where the building exploded. The first thing I thought of was Contact when they blew up that ship.
Yeah.
Oh yeah. And I was I wonder if like that's what happened. Yeah, but like obviously there's no context in the book for that, so like that's obviously not what happened. But like that was like the first thing that popped in my mind because I love that movie too.
Yeah, so good. And you know, there's another one that's like pretty much tries to remain within real science, real hard science, even though it goes to, you know, crazy ends. Um, it just it's not implausible in any way that that would be the case. And to bring in Hitler's, you know, first broadcast from the Berlin Olympics as the first thing, it was, I just thought it was just so elegantly beautiful the way it was done. You know, one of my favorites still. Contact.
Definitely, yeah. I haven't read the book, but I've definitely seen the movie multiple times.
Yeah, the book is still sitting on my shelf.
I think everyone here on the pod definitely rewatches and rereads. We're not like one and done, any of us.
Yeah,
for sure,
absolutely.
Yeah, that's a good question actually. Like, which books have you read multiple times? Like, obviously, like Thalia and I are on record. We've read Three Body Problem multiple times, but I've also read Foundation. You know, the Foundation like original trilogy multiple times. Yeah, how about you guys? Which are your books that you go back to?
Well, I have to admit I don't do as much reading as I used to, and I think the book I've read the most would be Catch 22,
Oh,
which
nice.
yeah, which is just one of it. I love that book so much.
Really says it all.
Yeah, yeah. But science fiction books, I don't think I've read any of them more than once. Now, I watch movies multiple times.
I find that there's so many books out there to read. I don't have time to read them more than once. Like, and I mean, I think I've read The Lord of the Rings several times, but that's not science fiction, but still one of my favorite books of all time.
That's a commitment. That's
No,
there's
kidding.
There's a series that I'm going to start again that's called The Game is Life, by Charles Schott, I think his name is, and it's about simulation theory and how the whole plot revolves around the fact that we live in a simulation. And there's 10 books in that series, and I've read them, and I'm going to start that series again because it's fascinating. And there's just so much talk now of simulation theory that I want to get back into to see how much I believe in it.
What's it called again?
It's called The Game is Life.
The Game is Life. I do love simulation theory. I think it's fascinating.
Yeah, he does it well. He explains why they're doing it, and you know, just it's good. Highly recommend it.
Writing it down now.
I will say we're all in the room because Mike recommended this book to me. That's the only reason that.
Oh, excellent. Okay, another recommendation for you is We Are Legion, We Are Bob.
I was gonna bring up We Are Legion, We Are Bob. Yeah, a book that I think does very little.
Love that series.
Oh yeah, that's a fun one. It's if you're not trying to sink too deep, but to go in the exact opposite direction. I think like the oeuvre that I've read the most, either in width or breadth, is a bit of an odd one, but I think it's probably like Greek mythology, because I read that so early, and then did a little bit of spent some time with the classics, growing up, and then have revisited in my adult life. So that's like early childhood, and then like middle school and high school. I studied Greek and Latin, and then revisited as an adult. And so many of these stories, you know, the ancient Greeks, they get it. They get it as much as we do. There's these fraught relationships between like father and son. There's like these circles that are doomed to repeat themselves. There's like the cyclical abuse of power. And yeah, it happens when people get turned into goats sometimes, but you know, that's just the cost of doing business. Same stories. So in terms of like what I've spent the most time with, I wasn't thinking about that before you asked, Dan, but now here it is.
That's very interesting.
Have you found any good modern adaptations of Greek mythology that you've experienced, or it's all just not good?
Oh boy, you really put me on the spot here.
Yeah, that's what we do. Hot seat.
Isn't there like a Neil Stevenson adaptation of the Greek gods?
I don't know.
There was that one with Jeff Goldblum as Zeus that came out recently as a TV series. It was sort of okay.
Yeah, well, obviously I'm very familiar with this topic. I love speaking at length about it. Maybe not on the Greek gods, but there is a really good adaptation of like the the Fables series, which is a graphic novel long series about all of the fairy tales who come back and live modern lives in New York City. Surprise, surprise. I like that. And you get to see that, like, the big bad wolf who has like a working class blue collar job to keep up appearances has this tension with everyone he shares relationships with, and the fables who can't pass as human like I don't know, the certain ogres or like the Three Little Pigs or something, or anyone who can't afford to like buy a potion to look human. Like I think the wolf has to like buy a glamour to look more human and less wolfy. So there's like a class separation. They all have to live on a farm upstate. And I find that that's a really interesting adaptation of something that the audience is like, oh yeah, like I don't need to have done a ton of work beforehand, but I know who Cinderella is. I know who Snow White is. I know who, the big bad wolf would be. And I think it's interesting and beautiful. And I don't read comic books, but I like that one.
That's interesting. Did you ever see that photo series? It's actually a Vancouver photographer. He did sort of modern adaptations of, Snow White living in the modern day with, a house full of dwarves, and they're all driving crazy. Now they're all old and she's old, and or Sleeping Beauty on top of like 15 mattresses in a garbage dump. Not Sleeping Beauty. That was who was
No, yeah, but The Princess and the Pea?
The Princess and the Pea, yeah. But she did a whole series, and they were all just brilliant, like really brilliant.
And that's the thing, is like when something is done well with style, it almost like it still matters what the source material is, but if it's done well or if it's done poorly, it's sort of all in that. So I don't like comic books or video games, but this art and this is Bill Willingham, by the way, is the author of Fables. He got me interested in that, and I even played the video game The Wolf Among Us because it's immersive. It has like an interesting soundtrack that pulls you in. It has, decisions that you make that impact the story that you're told. So it doesn't, like, my friend and I played and we got completely different results. And it felt very interesting and, I don't know, gripping in that way. So if this Vancouver photographer, like, if that touched you, then I absolutely believe that it was just something that an artist happened to do well.
Yeah, and it was so simple because it was just a reinterpretation of all these fairy tales, and it's like making a sequel to a film with a happy ending, and this couple finally falls in love or whatever. But revisit them 15 years later with a couple of kids screaming around, and
Ever after.
He's lost his job or something, and it's like, and this was all about reinterpreting these fairy tales, and it was brilliant. And I do love the ideas of taking a narrative and what happens at the end of that, like where does it go, when reality sets in. Not enough of that these days.
Well, I could certainly use more culture in my life, so if anything like that rolls through again, let me know.
I will. I think she still lives here.
All right. Well, I wanted to end with kind of like a final question for everyone. Like, what in the movie of Project Hail Mary are you most looking forward to seeing adapted? Like that you think is the most interesting part from the book that you want to see on the screen? And let's go with Mike first.
I'm looking forward to seeing how Ryland and Rocky talk to each other and how that whole communication between them evolves from them learning the language, but then actually just how they converse with each other.
Yeah. I think in the trailer they kind of alluded to like a little bit, right?
A little bit, yeah. To start.
Yeah, it's like very small, but yeah, definitely. Like I'm also interested to see how they kind of it evolves over time, because like by after a couple of chapters, like they're just like conversing like normal, and so like how do they convey that on screen? It's like, yeah, I agree, that's going to be pretty interesting. How about you, Guy?
Yeah, I mean, I feel exactly the same way. I think when listening to the book the first time, and there's the ship, and now they're kind of, are they communicating with each other? And it was, there's that tension of meeting. There's always that tension of meeting the alien for the first time. What's this going to be like? And because it's so reality based to a larger degree, because it's Andy Weir, you're expecting something to be more real than fantasy, and then it becomes like a buddy picture, and that watching that transition is going to be fascinating, how they do that. because there's that real fear and that tension, but the excitement, and then the payoff will be this. The payoff be kind of almost a letdown because there won't be any fear or any, like no jump scare or anything like that. But then it descends into this buddy picture, which I think is going to be really, really cool.
How about you, Thalia?
I guess I hope it is impressed on us how satisfying it is to solve problems.
Yeah.
I don't know that I can always capture it when I summarize the book or try and explain it in writing or explain it to someone else. Like, you got to read this book. They really get something, but it's something that we've all experienced, even if we haven't traveled, intergalactic miles, but like our brains got us around something really tricky. And I hope we get to see that.
Yeah, I'd say for me, like the thing I'm interested in is like if they can beef up like the plot on Earth a little bit, like I would like to see more of like the reaction from humanity about like this crisis. Like we get the kind of sense from Rylan that he's doing it for students, but you never really see like that directly in the book. It's kind of done in flashbacks, and I don't know. Like I would like to see a little bit more of like sort of like the geopolitical like ramifications to such a big event happening, a world-ending event happening. See how that kind of plays out. So yeah, seeing if they beef that up from the books.
It'll be interesting to see Ryan Gosling in a solo role for most of the film.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh,
See if he can pull it off. Yeah.
I'm hoping to do it. Yeah, that's a good point.
Yeah, I think he will.
Well, you heard it here first.
Yeah. All right. Well, Well, thank you very much, Mike, for joining us. And thanks, Guy, for joining us again. And thanks, Thalia.
Thank you for having me.
For setting this up.
Thanks.
Yeah.
Fun nerding out with you guys.
Definitely fun to talk to you guys.
100%.
Please check out Rehydrate.space for release episodes, reading lists, pronunciation guides, and all the other stuff we put up there. Please email us at rehydrate@fastmail.com, on Mastodon at rehydrate@mass.to, or on Rehydrate on Blue Sky. And please stay tuned for whatever the next thing we're going to do for the next season, which we haven't decided yet, but hopefully it will come soon. Thanks again, guys, for joining us, and talk to you again soon.